5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, there is really a narrow question presented here today before this committee, and that is, should Hunter Biden be held in contempt of Congress for his failure or refusal to comply with a valid subpoena for deposition? That's it. That's the narrow question that's before this body today. That's the narrow question that's ultimately going to be presented to the whole body of Congress. And this matter is really about a procedural adherence to the law, more so than it is about the underlying substantive issues that we want to talk about. We have a valid and lawful and enforceable subpoena that has been issued to Hunter Biden for a deposition. It regarded a legislative purpose, and that proper subpoena must be complied with. There's no discretion there on behalf of the recipient of that subpoena to say when and how he wants to do it. It is by force of law that he must comply with the subpoena. That's point number one. I have two further points. Secondly, this is a matter regarding the acts and omissions of Hunter Biden, not others. I note that many of my colleagues on the other side want to talk about other people and other issues and other things that are irrelevant to this proceeding today. The proceeding, again, is a narrow question about Hunter Biden's acts and omissions as it relates to the subpoena that was issued to him for a deposition. That's it. Responsibility and accountability for decisions has to be individualized in this particular instance. When I was home over the break, I had lots of opportunity to deal with my two young children, my 6 and my 8-year-old, and oftentimes when I deal with them, what I find is when they're having an issue, I go to one and I say, "Why did you do this?" And he wants to point at his sister and say, "Well, she did this." He wants to deflect and talk about his sister's action. I have to respond and remind him, no, let's talk about your responsibility for your own decisions and the accountability that you're going to have for the decisions that you're making. That's what I feel like when I'm here today listening to some of the arguments on the other side. They want to deflect and say, oh, but let's look at somebody else and something else that happened years ago. Well, no, the narrow question is, what did Hunter Biden do or not do in response to the subpoena for testimony and deposition? That's the narrow question here today. The decisions of Hunter Biden have to have consequences. And that leads me to point number 3. Because if this body fails or refuses to hold Hunter Biden in contempt of Congress, future citizens will know that such subpoenas are meaningless. Whether or not they come from a democratically controlled Judiciary Committee or a Republican-controlled Judiciary Committee, they're meaningless. And in that instance, the legislative branch would be without power to effectively compel attendance. We do this over and over again as the Article I branch of government. We cede power to somebody else. We don't want to enforce it when it's tough. We have to hold ourselves accountable, and in this instance, we have to hold a private citizen accountable when they do not respond to a properly and validly issued subpoena. If we do not do that, then for years to come, other people will say, but Hunter Biden didn't show up. Why should I show up? There will be no consequences. I don't need to do this. Or maybe it's just that because Hunter Biden's daddy is the president, that's the issue, that he knows he's going to get coverage. It's clear to me that Hunter Biden believes he is above the law. This Judiciary Committee today cannot let it go. We have an obligation and a duty to hold this citizen responsible and accountable for his failure or refusal to respond to a valid subpoena for a deposition. Not a hearing before this committee, but a deposition. Any other American under subpoena would be required to attend, and any other American would not get the protection that Hunter Biden is getting in this instance. We must act strongly and stand firm, not just for Republican issuances of subpoenas, but for Democratic issuance of subpoenas in years to come, because one of these days the tables are going to be turned, and we must be consistent in the application of our law. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.